You've just entered the law offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. If you've come for actual legal advice, you need to turn right around, honey. You need to get out of here, 'cause you ain't gonna get none of that. They quibble, and they squabble, and they bicker. But if you want to hear meaningless opinions, this is the right place. They got plenty of that. Stuff that makes no sense at all. They go off on tangents. It's crazy talk. If that's your thing, keep listening. They'll keep talking.
Oh no no, oh no no, it's another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. You've entered the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. Yay!
Welcome back to another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker on this March 3rd, 2021. We have an incredibly special guest today. His name is Stephen Perkins. He's the drummer for the, what's the word to use? Legendary, most influential band probably of the late 80s, the one that harkened the death of hair metal, and that is called Jane's Addiction. He's also been with Porno For Pyros and a number of other different projects. He's going to be helping us out later today with our client, which is Mars, Bars, and Stars. And so on that note, Brendan, I know you probably have your bigger finger on the pulse of question to ask, Stephen. So why don't you take this?
Wow. Nice way to put me right on the spot.
Well, I usually do it to Greg, so it's your turn.
Oh, I see. Okay, fair enough. So, just outside of whatever, I've always been a huge fan of Jane's Addiction. In fact, when I told my wife that we were interviewing you, she's like, "Are you kidding me? Really?" Because I used to make her mixtapes back when she was living in Minneapolis and I was in LA. And I remember one of them I had one of your guys' songs on, and it stuck with her. So how did you get involved in music in the first place? What was the driving force? I was a musician. I was mostly in it for girls and never really got good at my instrument. And so I'm always interested to hear that story.
Except the girl instrument, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even really perfect that, to be completely honest.
Well, it's like anything. You practice. You never work at it. It's a practice. So you're still practicing, which is good. And same with music. It's not a job. It's an experiment at all times to reflect who you are at that time and be in the moment. And I realized that at 8 and 10 years old, when I started listening to jazz drummers. Each drummer had a different personality. And I love Motown, I love rock and roll, but it seemed like the drummers kind of blended into one sound. But the jazz drummers were having conversations with the other instruments. John Coltrane and Elvin Jones, they were arguing, Miles and Tony Williams, they were laughing. And I always loved to hear a personality of the instrument come out from the musician. And so my favorite players, be it guitar, trumpet, drums, bass, are the personality players. I really want to get to know them through their instrument. Someone like Keith Moon, who's so orchestral, and he's such a firework and an eventful drummer. You would imagine that's the way his personality was. And Neil Peart from Rush, so sophisticated and planned out, and so much thought put into each part. And I would think that's what he was like to hang out with. So my interest in music was really about the personalities of the people playing it, and drumming is an athletic, endurance, stamina, competition between the musicians and drummers. And I always love that, to see Gene Krupa going nuts against Buddy Rich and them sweating and looking at each other, and just, it's a battle, it's a real, it was a boxing match between musicians. So there was so much
about Ginger Baker. Baker's a personality. But not a very good one from what I hear. Not a very good personality.
He was very tough, I heard, to get along with. But then again, he was such an original musician. And I loved what he did with Cream, of course. But when he went to Africa and hung out with Fela Kuti and made records with Fela, and I realized actually in myself the love of Jamaican and African rhythms, Stuart Copeland, Ginger Baker, Babatunde Olatunji, Fela. And you realize even with Ringo and Charlie Watts from the Stones, if you take their parts and put them on a djembe or a bongo, they're based in African rhythms. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and there was always these great drum circles at Venice Beach. And I was kind of shy, you know, as a youngster, but I would get closer to these drum circles, and it really wasn't about technique or who was showing off. It was about this great social glue of everybody loosening up. And what I thought was incense, now I know better. You know, the smell of the drum circle.
That helps.
It's patchouli, right?
Exactly, it was a patchouli.
Yeah.
You know, they say the word jazz came from jasmine because all the girls were dancing, and the jasmine perfume would smell up the scene, and it was a beautiful sound of music and sound, and the word jazz came about. I could be wrong, but
I've never heard that before, but I'm willing to accept it because I had no idea where it came from.
I heard that jazz was a euphemism for fucking back in the day. It was like, hey, I'm gonna jazz that girl tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard that, seriously.
Well, that's true. Jazz and rock and roll, it all was about sex, you know. It was another way to say let's bang. But, you know, I really loved music. I loved being part of the party, bringing the percussion instruments to the high school parties. You know, other people would bring party favors, be it smoke and drink. I would bring bongos and shakers. And I thought that's the way to loosen people up. And I got
that was Greg's stripper name, was Bongos and Shakers.
That's so true. You know, a lot of dollar bills came out of that. But and you know, there was always these different levels of being a drummer. You know, I started on a practice pad and pillows, and I learned how to bounce a stick off a surface. And then I got a snare drum, and then it was about getting some volume and technique. And then that's great romance, knowing the rudiments I was learning were the same rudiments that all my favorites started with. And so I was connecting in line with Chick Webb and Gene Krupa and Elvin Jones and Tony Williams. They all got the same rudiment book that I did. So I was learning these rudiments on how to use my hands and thinking to myself, these are the same exact exercises that my heroes went through to get better. Right. And so that was, I felt like I was part of a union, a team, you know, and we were there was some kind of unity between me and people I've never met before, but we practiced the same stuff. You know, it's like someone learning how to throw a slider or a curveball. There's a certain way to throw it, and you're learning from the greats and the tradition.
I saw an interview with Perry Farrell where he was saying the difference between like a jazz drum and rock drum is just flipping your hand over.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said about holding a stick traditionally, but that came a lot from the marching band and people marching. How the snare drum was slanted to the right or to the left, and they had to actually have their hands slanted to actually get the surface.
Oh.
But you know, learning how to bounce the drumstick off a snare drum from a pillow and then getting cymbals and tom-toms and bongos, those are different surfaces as well. So you have to learn how to use your technique on different bouncing surfaces. And then when you get a drum set, you start to learn about your hips and your ankles and your feet and how to dance on this drum set and make it an instrument, musical, lyrical. And then I joined the marching band, and I thought I was a great drummer until I was surrounded by 10 other drummers that did the same thing I did. So that's when the competition kicked in. That's when I got a competitive spirit. I wanted to be first chair. I wanted to stand out, but not stand out and ruin the song. Stand out because I was disciplined and purified. And there was something editing all the junk out, just getting to the point. This is what you do to make the song powerful. And if it's a dynamic, quiet moment, or if it's a punch in the face, do it with full force. And you know, when you're putting up a nail in a wall, if you just miss it or if it doesn't go in right, there's no satisfaction there. But when it goes in right, it's so satisfying. One snap, the nail's in the wall, you hang your picture. That's what drumming feels like when you do it right.
That's a great analogy. I mean, I've never heard, but that's a really good analogy. I can see that.
Yeah, because you have to pull the nail back out, and you got a hole in the wall, and that's not the right spot, or it was too high or too low. It's frustrating.
Now you got all kinds of holes, and now it's just a really big hole, and you're trying to hang the picture, and it's leaning down. Oh, I've never experienced that.
That'd be kind of like the story of my autobiography. Actually, it's just a lot of missed nails.
I missed them. It's not 9-inch nails. It was the missed nails. But
that's right.
And then, of course, jazz was my love. But in LA, I couldn't find many jazz players. No one was playing saxophone or trombone or even piano. It was about guitar and bass.
Just like about 87 or 88 you're talking about? Or what about?
1978, 79. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn how to play with muscle because I never got a chance to play with an upright bass player and a piano player and learn about the soft dynamics. I had to play with power because I'm sitting next to someone with a Marshall stack or an Ampeg bass rig. And so that took me to another level of, I guess you can say, strength. And I now have a chance to play with musicians that we can get quiet. And it's not easy to really punch a high tempo at a quiet volume. And there's something about learning how to use your instrument at a soft volume, and then going up and bringing it high and bringing it back down. And that's a whole nother technique. So there were so many different levels of my drumming, the stages of how I got better at listening to people. It's like a tennis player. You can't play alone. You really need to play with somebody. And that's how you get better. If you're too good and they don't hit the ball back after your 100-mile serve, then what's the point of playing? You want to have rallies. You want to be able to run around the court. So you search out musicians that you can play with that challenge you, and hopefully you can get better by listening, and they can get better and listen to you. And that jazz conversation becomes part of the experience. And that's how I got into music. And when I started playing in front of people and seeing their reaction, that turned me on so much, to see people move and smile, to see them drop, if their jaws dropped because you pulled off something with speed or technique. That really turned me on, So in the last 10 months, not playing in front of anybody, it's been tough, It's a lot of inward. You just keep practicing and you wait to get in front of people. But there's all these different levels that keep on bringing me up. And I used to play only the records that I loved. And then I realized I should buy records I don't like and see what that does to my drumming.
Greg, you have some of those, don't you?
Yeah.
Greg's got a whole box of records. So my question, when was your first live performance? Like, when was the first time? Because I remember as I was not a musician. I'm not even good at it, but I remember doing music with people who were more talented than I, and getting up and doing that thing where you're in front of a crowd and all of a sudden there's this, I can't really describe, and I've certainly done my fair share of drugs, anything that even comes close to the feeling of a crowd of people cheering or singing along with words you wrote, because I was more of a songwriter.
Gotcha.
There's something magical. When was the first time that you experienced that?
Well, believe it or not, I was 13 at my bar mitzvah.
Nice. And, captive audience.
After doing my Haftorah and my big speech in front of everybody in the synagogue.
I remember that all too well.
Yeah, I felt, my Hebrew name is Shlomo.
Moshe here.
Hey, thank you, man. So Shlomo here, couldn't wait to get to the party, and there was a band playing, and I got behind the kit, and we did Hot Stuff by Donna Summer. And I remember nice. my friends and everybody that came. My brother was older, all his high school buddies, and they were just tripping out. I nailed it. And I felt like not only did doing the Haftorah with Rabbi Zeldin make me a man, that moment really, really brought me to the level. Now I'm a man. And then a year later at 14, I played at the Troubadour in Los Angeles.
Wow.
With some friends. And the band was called Champion. It was more like a Kansas or Styx. It was kind of like an uplifting. It wasn't very dangerous, but it was good players. They were.
How do you get a gig at the Troubadour at the age of 14 though? How does that happen?
Well, these were high school buddies that were 17. Oh, actually, my buddy Brian, his older brother, saw me play in the marching band, and he said, "Hey, man, we're looking for a drummer." So I was hanging out with 16 and 17-year-olds, and they booked the gig. And I realized at that age, all you got to do is book the gig, do a lot of rehearsal, put some flyers up, and you're there. You might not be liked, you might be hated, but at least you're doing it and you're learning.
So this is like 1981, 82, something like that? Okay.
1981. And then me and Dave Navarro, we met in that year, and we started a more dangerous band called Disaster. So the first band was called Champion. I just went 180. I went into Disaster. And, we dressed like Loverboy, but we sounded like Slayer. Let's just leave it at that.
Was Navarro at your bar mitzvah too, or you just came?
No, I met him about 8 months after I was bar mitzvah.
Okay. Because he has a lot of tattoos, and I noticed that it doesn't really seem like you have any.
No, I'm just covered in flesh.
No, do you have any?
Because you want to be able to be
influences?
buried in a Jewish cemetery. I'm betting that's why
right.
you. Okay, I knew it.
Yeah.
Do you have any Klezmer references in your rhythmic repertoire?
I bet he does.
I joined a Klezmer band, and we played at my own wedding. A cat named Leo Chelyapov from Moscow. He moved to LA. He played clarinet. And, like I said, I love jazz. It was like my connection to the Benny Goodman story. And this cat played Klezmer, and he said, man, you know how to rock. Let's do this, and I'll teach you how to play in 7 and 9 and 11, all these time signatures that really weren't that friendly in rock and roll. And jazz, maybe, but, Motown and rock and roll is usually 4/4 or maybe 6/8. And that was great because it was upright bass, it was clarinet, saxophone once in a while, and me on drums. And those klezmer tempos are popping, and the accents are very tight. And you have to be tight. It's almost like punk rock. It really is rocking,
You're pretty familiar with punk in like the 90s. Did you ever hear of a band called the Weird Lovemakers?
Oh, Weird Lovemakers. I don't know. Are they Los Angeles or San Francisco?
They were like Arizona. They're out of
Nobody heard of them. That's my old band. Nobody heard of us. Nobody knew who we were.
You see, the other day I found out that Greg had a listing on IMDb, and I'm like, why does Greg have a listing on IMDb? And then he's part of like some funny little concert film, and he was in this band, the Weird Lovemakers, which is a punk band back in the you said it was late 90s, early 2000s, Greg. When was that?
Mid to late 90s.
Yeah. So
but you know what I love about punk rock? I mean, people don't understand. It's not just about angst. It was disciplined. You had to be a disciplined musician to play punk rock. They didn't just get up there and just bash around. They worked their butts off to really have this, like the Klezmer music, these tight moments. And if you start slow and then speed up the tempos, a great punk band to me is quite it's pure. There's a purity to it, And
well, you know why you never heard of the Weird Lovemakers is because I didn't bust my ass, and I would fuck up every show. I'd be on the wrong fret half the time. I'd be like, oh shit, I'm drunk. I'm not playing the song right.
Well, I remember talking to some cats. Jane's Addiction did some shows with the Ramones, and they said, if you get off stage and you don't feel like you're having a heart attack, you didn't do it right. You got to get up there and give it all, and then you leave it on the stage, and then that's that, man. And you give it to them, and you blood, sweat, and tears is left there. And I always love thinking about Iggy Pop or some of the great athletes. When they get back to their hotel after the gig, they just plop into the bathtub or into the bed or on the couch because they put everything into the show, and they don't have time to go out and party all night. They're done. They're cooked. And that's because the audience got it,
Did you ever see those old footage on YouTube of like Jackie Wilson performing? Like that guy was having a seizure practically. He was a maniac.
It's like Meatloaf had to have oxygen on stage with him to survive his show.
Well, that was just because he was 400 pounds. I mean, he had a hard time walking up the stairs, that guy.
That was pre-show. But and then when me and Navarro started doing shows in Los Angeles, we realized, like I said earlier, you put up flyers, you get the gig, and then you realize what you need to work on, your strengths and your weaknesses, and who you want to play with, and then you start finding your group of core players. And I still am friends with a lot of cats that I started with. And Jane's Addiction started, I was only 17. Perry was 26. And most of the cats that were around us, the Chili Peppers, Fishbone, X, the Minutemen, they were all in their 20s. So me and Navarro were the kids around there, but we're still friends with all those guys. And, and a lot of people that came to our shows turned into Tool and Rage Against the Machine and No Doubt and the Smashing Pumpkins and Alice in Chains. These are the cats that were coming to our shows, and I'm still friends with all of them. So it's a great community of people that love to play. It's competitive, but then again, you're not really competing for the same. You're not competing for a trophy. We all have the same audience. The people that love Rage love Alice. The people that love Tool love the Pumpkins. So
you ever jammed with George Hurley from the Minutemen? He's got an amazing personality as a drummer.
Yes, So me and Mike Watt and George did a song together. We covered a Who song called Sparks.
Wow.
Double drummer and bass. And I think Nels Klein played guitar in that session.
So it took two of you to make up Keith Moon, you're saying?
Yeah.
You're like, we need two of us.
He was Keith, I was Moon, or either way.
Right.
You know, and I met Mike Watt and George in 1986. Jane's Addiction played the LA street scene with Fishbone and a bunch of great bands that day. And Mike Watt gave me a hug. I'll never forget it. He goes, "Oh, my name's Mike Watt. Call me Watt. What's your name?" I said, Perkins. He goes, "All right, Perkins." And he hugged me. And we've been in 3 bands together since then. A band called Hellride. He joined my band called Banyan. And he's also played with Porno For Pyros for a few years. So he's one of the punk rock godfathers, one of my heroes. And George, who is just, he's underrated as a drummer. And he really was like this jazz, hybrid jazz, progressive drummer.
You're right, yeah. Very, very much so. And I don't even think that guy like grew up listening to jazz. I think he was just this like surfer dude, right?
Yep, he's a surfer, and he actually carves surfboards, and I think that's what he prefers to do now is make surfboards opposed to make music.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
So
But
you
yeah,
was one of those bands was that Stooges cover band, right?
That's right. All right is all Stooges.
Okay.
And we do like the verse and the chorus, and then we jam on the groove for like 5 minutes and just go nuts.
So you're like part Stooges, part Grateful Dead?
Yeah, exactly.
The Grateful Stooges.
The Grateful Stooges. You know, and I've also been very fortunate with my relationship with the Grateful Dead, and I've been friends with the drummers and Bob Weir.
I mean the live drummers.
They got some great drummers in that band. And, you know, Jane's Addiction did shows with Bill Graham as a promoter, and Bill always opened his doors and he was great to talk to. And the one thing I remember Bill said to me, he goes, "Stephen Perkins, I want to tell you something about the business. It's not about the money. It's about the money."
Nice.
I got that now. I figured it out.
More money, more money, more money.
But, you know, and the music world, unlike, I guess, athletes, they have to hang it up one day. But musicians never really have to, man. We can go until we drop. You know,
well, you're like a year younger than me, and I already know the issues I have with my elbows and knees and things. I can imagine with your instrumentality, you must have some creaks and things popping in various different parts of your anatomy. Does that affect your playing currently?
I absolutely keep an eye on my body and what I put in it. And of course, when you're younger, you know, you get off the stage and you go all night and you find something to do. But now, not that I don't do that, but I don't, you know, put too much poison in the system, and I just try to keep it clear. And I take pride in playing my ass off, and whatever I think of, I want to be able to do it with my hands and feet. And I hate when you can't. And that's always so frustrating if I think I want to try something and I think my body's not going to let me do it. So I don't want those days to show up more often than not. So I drink water, I work out, I do cardio, and I play drums all the time. I mean, in the last year, I've been kind of going back to where I started with the Book of the Rudiments, because I'm not gigging at all, but I can sit down with this book of exercises and remember what I was like when I was 13, that romance I had thinking that the great drummers of all time used the same rudiment book. And I do that now, and it's challenging to bounce the stick correctly and use the elbows and wrists the way you're supposed to in tradition, because when you're rocking out, that goes out the window. So I do take it seriously on how the body and the mind work together. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with all-nighters and just 3 days in a row not sleeping, but as long as it doesn't affect your show or your performance, you know. And
I was a drummer for 20 years, and I gotta say though, I think being a drummer is like being an athlete. I don't know if you can grow as old gracefully as guitarists. They got it easy. They just stand there and pluck a few strings. Because when I used to drum, I would be drenched in sweat, even if it was freezing in the room. My friend once told me he treasures this memory that we were playing in Chicago at a club, and it was a little chilly in there. and I took my shirt off and my pants. I was just playing in my underwear because I was so hot. And he said he looked back and he saw steam rising from my body.
I love that.
And he was so proud of me. He was like, you were drumming that hard, Greg.
That's a beautiful vision. And you know what, though? And there is this sense, you know, when you play drums, like a vocalist, you got to have your body in shape. A guitar player, if he feels like crap, he can still plug in, turn up, use the distortion pedal, and he sounds like he's feeling good. It's the same sound. But if a drummer or a vocalist doesn't feel good, or if he's not in the mood, it affects the playing. And then that's absolutely true, you know. And I know now, you know, growing up with Navarro, one of my favorite guitar players was my best friend. And it's just when I play music, I hear guitar first because that's how we grew up. And as someone who grew up with a piano player, or someone grew up with a horn player or a bass player, that's where their head goes when they write music. So I always grew up bonding with guitar. And I always think about some of my favorite heroes, Alex and Eddie Van Halen. You know, they're always connected, and when we miss Eddie, but the music's connected. The Cats and Pantera, Vinnie Paul and Dimebag, they're both gone. But what a connection, because guitar and drums always kind of weave together in the music. And I, you know, a lot of people think about the rhythm section in rock and roll, but I really think about the whole thing as an outfit and how it fits together. And when you make a song, the lyrical, the content and the words are just as important as the bass line.
So you have like a more holistic gestalt point of view of
exactly.
music. Okay.
You know, and also the phrasing of the words and where the words and the syllables are placed can affect my patterns. And so nowadays, a lot of people do drum tracks separate of the band, and you don't have a chance to react off each other. And I think that takes away some of that sensitivity that the drummer could have in a scene. And, you know, people now record to Pro Tools, and the engineer and the producer will actually look at the Pro Tools and see if the drums are matching with the click track. And I said, close your eyes. It doesn't matter what it looks like on the computer, man. What's it feel like? You know, that's the thing.
Yeah, basically they're just making gluten-free music these days.
That's so true. And, you know, and I really think the light at the end of this hell tunnel that we're going through is going to be great film, novels, music, art. It's going to inspire new stories. And this pain that we're feeling is going to help the arts. And I truly believe that will be, you know, it'll be a filter. Some people are not going to show up after this is done and still be into music and making art. They're going to have to get a day job. That's okay. But the ones that get through the filter and keep doing it, I think it's going to be pure and it's going to be powerful.
So you never had a day job. You like went into music at the age of 17. Was there ever any plan to, I don't know, be a paper boy or something along the line that, you know,
a lawnmower?
I mean, you didn't even have a chance to go, I don't know if I'm going to make it in this business or not. You basically made it in the business like within a couple of years.
To me, getting into the van and driving to Vegas and back for one-nighters was a success. I made it, you know. It didn't pay the bills back then, but it definitely gave me something to believe in. And I always say this because I remember reading a great review of my drumming, and I thought to myself, cool, you know, they like me. But then a week later, I read a review and they hated me. So it's like, okay, I cannot believe what they say. I have to believe in myself, because if I believe the guy that loves me, I'm going to have to believe the guy that hates me. So just believe in yourself. And that to me was a success story, that I love to play drums and I love to see people react. But you're right. I never had a day job. I never had a real job. I do 9 to 5. It's 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. That's how I do it.
Get behind those hours.
The money comes and goes, but the power of music is always there for me. Some gigs are big paydays, some gigs aren't. And you know, sometimes I spent the day with some of my heroes at a rehearsal, Mick Jagger, Lou Reed, and Ozzy. But those weren't paydays, but they were such a great influence on my drumming, and they gave me something in my pocket, which was this confidence. And then I get on stage with someone maybe I don't care about, and I get $10,000 that night. So, you know, what's the point? Do I want to play with cats that turn me on or make money? I want to do both, really. Like Bill Graham said, it's about the money.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Lou Reed. I was just thinking, have you ever had the comparison that Jane's Addiction in your era is similarly influential as Velvet Underground was for their era?
Absolutely.
And do you think that's
I
real?
about the influence of bands like the Underground and even Jane's Addiction is not really the sound, but it's the attitude, and it's the changing of the guard. Like you said, we put hair metal to sleep. It wasn't Nirvana, it was Jane's Addiction.
Right.
And that's not good or bad. It's just what happened. I was going, at the Sunset Strip, I saw Motley and Rat and Poison and all these bands, but they all kind of sounded the same. To me, Motley was the top of the game because I love Tommy Lee. But the labels in LA with Geffen and Warner Brothers and Capitol, they signed up everything. When we signed a deal with Warner's, they actually talked about us going to Sire, which was under their umbrella. And Sire had the Ramones, Pretenders, and REM. Sire was probably better built as a marketing tool for Jane's Addiction and for radio because they understood our audience, the college audience. But we really wanted to be on Warner Brothers and challenge Warner Brothers to take this late night after hours band and show the world what it sounded like late night in LA. But we're not going to be polished. We're not going to wear, a stylized outfit that someone showed up with, went shopping for us at Fred Siegel, and we were straight ahead artists. We wanted to do it our way.
Oh, you were hip cats.
Warner Brothers was cool with it. They had to challenge themselves because Sire, like I say, the team at Sire Records probably would understand what we were doing more than the team at Warner's. Warner Brothers had Devo, Doobie Brothers, Van Morrison, and Van Halen. I mean, these bands were on the radio daily, and they didn't have to. Whip It was just the coolest song ever. It definitely was a new taste of music, but new wave was hot. There was Howard Jones and Thomas Dolby and whoever else you want to throw into the new wave category.
Kaja Gugu.
And I would always search out new wave bands that had a real drummer, like the Cars, B-52s, Missing Persons with Terry Bozzio.
Terry Bozzio was great.
He's amazing, but I didn't mind the drums that was happening with New Order and Thomas Dolby, but I couldn't really relate to him because there wasn't someone playing drums. I wanted to find a drummer that turned me on.
Speaking of this era, I wanted to ask you, did you ever get to meet Stuart Copeland? He's my drum god.
Yeah, you know what I'd love, like I said early in the interview about personalities.
Yeah.
Sting wrote great songs, but without Stuart Copeland, there's no fire, there's no urgency, there's no event. It's just vocals and guitar parts and chords. You put Stuart there, and you've got a story to tell, and you can tell where Stuart comes from and the music that he loved, and from Jamaican influence to punk rock and his jazz chops and holding the stick traditional style. And I did meet Stuart, and those cats really changed the way the drummers were looked at. And that's one thing I do like about Jane's Addiction is a million things, but one thing I'm very proud of is when Jane's hit the scene, a lot of the drummers were imitating Tommy Lee, and they all were potatoes.
You said they were all potatoes?
There was a lot of meat potato drummers,
Okay.
which was great. But after Jane's Addiction, you had Primus and the Pumpkins and Tool and all these drummers that Pearl Jam. Every drummer sounded different from each other. It wasn't bash doom got the doom got the doom. No, every drummer had something to say. And I'm not sure if Jane's had that influence, but after Jane's, I noticed the drum world really had a great, colorful scene. And that's what Stuart Copeland did to the drum world. He made a lot of drummers realize you can be different and still not get in the way of the song. I remember hearing Ringo say as a kid, play for the song. I didn't know what that meant as a youngster. And now you realize you have to stand out, but never step on the tune.
Right.
When I was sorry.
And I was going to say, for those people who are listening who aren't drummer aficionados, who would you say are, say, maybe the top 4 or 5 drummers that are currently making music that you go, that guy, that girl, they get it?
They got the goods.
Well, there's different the genres of music are so important when you bring that up.
Sure.
You know, well, I was so into heavy metal as a youngster, and then I got out. But when Pantera showed up on the scene and Vinnie Paul was there, I said, you know what? I'm going to get back into metal because this drummer is turning me on. And the same thing happened with Slipknot, the drummer Joey Jordison.
Okay.
It was the drummer that brought me in. And about 15 years ago, a band called Mute Math, a drummer named Darren King. Darren turned me on. And so it's sometimes it's not the music that I love, it's the drummer, and then the music will follow. And I think that's really what I hear. My son is 11, and the last year or so, he's been playing 21 Pilots. And I like what I hear coming out of that band. It's only 2 guys, you know? And then he's playing guitar and he puts on the White Stripes. I'm like, I'm liking it more than ever to hear my son play along to the White Stripes tunes, because, you know, the drum parts are simple, but they're completely connected. And Meg and Jack are like this one sound. And so I think, you know, it's tough because a lot of people are writing beats with a computer, and it's not a bad thing or a good thing, but they're not sitting at a drum set and they're writing with the machine. And that to me is a great challenge. I remember putting on hip hop records and trying to imitate these drum sounds. And it was like, I was like, how does a person do that? Well, no, it was written on a machine. Yeah. And it was, you know, but the direction of all drummers, the hybrid of technology and organic music together is really changing the sound of drumming and where that's headed. I'm very fortunate to have a great circle of musicians in LA that I love to play with. And, you know, seeing Dave Grohl or Taylor Hawkins play, in Chad Smith and some of, you know, even though these bands are 10, 15 years old, they're still drummers that got guts, punch. And that's what I love when I hear a drummer say something behind the kit. And sometimes the music, like I was saying a minute ago, after COVID, I have a feeling you're going to get this rebirth of musicianship and hot shots, you know, and there's a pyramid and it takes all the musicians to make it, but there's only one guy on the top. And that top rock changes, you know. The top rock was Hendrix once. Maybe it was Clapton. Maybe it was Jimmy Page. Maybe it was Eddie Van Halen. But the pyramid's there, and the top rock always changes. So I'm always got my eyes out for the next big thing. But also, it's usually a great band that brings it up. You know, it brings the drummer to the next level. And hopefully, there's a bunch of guys playing right now that we haven't heard of. They're going to come out in the next year or so and just like, oh man, that's where it's at.
I was always expecting like all the guys who were beating on 5-gallon containers outside of subway stops in different parts of the country, that they would be like the next generation of major drummers, because they got the most practice. You know, and they got instant gratification.
Yeah,
that's
I call those. Yeah, the trash can bangers. I love that though. You know, I mean, you make it out of whatever you can get your hands on. And I'm very fortunate to have this drum set behind me. And I wake up, and if I don't feel like playing, I remember what a fortunate life I have. I never had a real job. I've got a drum room in the back of the house. Go for it. You know, don't forget this. Don't look at it and go, and it's just another day. No, man, it's a day to get your drum on.
I bet you have drums like throughout your house. It's probably not just this room. You probably have drums in every room of your house.
In the bathroom.
That's right.
Some bongos.
Bongos.
While you're taking a dump, you can practice some bongo riffs.
Constantly like, what are you doing in the bathroom, kid?
I wanted to ask you about was the band named Destruction, did you say?
Disaster.
The first Disaster. What kind was that?
Disaster,
punk?
Yeah.
Was that punk or just hard rock?
No, it was, like I said, we kind of dressed like the band Loverboy, but we had more of a Slayer, thrash metal influence.
Oh, so like the thrash metal.
So Slayer with sweatbands?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, headbands and colorful
leg warmers.
Yeah. You know, but I've got the demos and I've got a couple of live recordings, and you know, I can tell that me and Navarro were definitely onto something. You know, the other guys were good players, but me and Dave would stand out as like, I guess in a sense, fireworks. There were some big events going on with me and Dave's playing, and when we started with Jane's Addiction, which was a great thing because Perry and Eric, the other two members, they wanted to tell stories with their music, and me and Dave wanted to show off our chops, and that's really the sound. That's the sound of Jane's Addiction. Is these. Eric was influenced by Joy Division and Bauhaus and Echo and the Bunnymen and Susie and the Banshees. There wasn't many fireworks in them playing, but these great songs.
And stories, Perry,
and Perry would write poems, not lyrics. He wouldn't say verse 1, verse 2, chorus, bridge, verse 3. Here's my poem.
So he was like Jim Morrison for you guys.
Yeah, let's write a song around the poem. One line's got 6 words. The next line's got 11 words. And then there's a chorus, but it doesn't really repeat itself. It happens once, and then we don't have to go back to it. How do you write a song around that? So there was this new, for me and Dave, especially at 17, this new fresh canvas to work with these cats that had new ideas. And those cats were thinking, look at Dave and Perkins. These guys can play the hell out of their instruments. What are we going to do with these guys, you know?
Well, it's interesting, since you bring it back up to Perry Farrell, and we haven't actually discussed our client yet for today. Somewhere back in the 90s in the Porno For Pyros period, he said that he had met aliens or something like that, that aliens were influencing him, and then he would talk to aliens. And, you know, in the song Pets, it talks about if Martians were in control. So now that the only planet in the solar system that's entirely inhabited by robots is Mars, would the robots then make us their pets in that particular sense?
Absolutely. Well, I was feeding my pet snake, and Perry looked at me and he goes, we'd make great pets. We'd sit there patiently waiting to get fed. We would use whatever environment these Martians or aliens would give us and make it our home, because they'd be controlling us. And I tried to become the clock. That's why that drum beat sounds like a tick tock, tick tock. I wanted literally to be the clock. And it wasn't if they come down, it's when they come down. And that's really how that song was started, with the poem and the drum beat. But it's true. If you think about sound waves, remember that movie Contact?
Yeah.
And the sound wave was still going out there, and it was finally received, and they sent the message back. I believe that, you know, I mean, everything we do is still out there, and where's it going? And who knows? I mean, it's out there, and someone's listening. And
there could be a planet out there that based their whole culture on I Love Lucy reruns. They just receive those. Their whole culture is based on.
That's right. And, you know, if you think about 3D printers and AI, you put those together, and there's your tomorrow's travel machine, because it'll go out there without anybody controlling it, and it'll fix itself because it's got a 3D printer connected. Okay, my lever broke. I'll just fix this because I'm an AI machine, and I've got a machine that can fix itself. And so there is that never-ending space travel. I think it's here. It's definitely, you know, controlled now by us to get to the rover over to Mars, but soon the AI and the 3D printer will be married, and we won't have anything to do with it. It'll just go explore space.
Well, you know, there was a death on Mars a couple of years back. One of the probes that had been sent there, you know, it covered, I think, about 15 square miles, eventually died because its solar panels were covered by the dust. And so the concept that you just brought up was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But they were talking about perhaps sending the new one, which just landed, Perseverance, but that's like 5,000 miles away from the dead body of the robot on the other side of Mars. So I don't know if that would work, but you know,
the robot's name was Opportunity. So
that died.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah,
I heard there was foul
Perseverance
play.
is the one that just landed.
I'm just saying you got to respect the robot.
I heard there was foul play involved.
Say his name, Oppie.
They say foul play was involved in that. I heard it's not cut and dry, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
So in other words, the native Martians decided that we can't have these interlopers anymore.
We got to send Lieutenant Colombo up there in a spacesuit to solve this.
Colombo. Was he cryogenically freezed so that, because he's not alive, Greg?
His brain is. They froze his brain because it was so brilliant.
So just send the brain up.
Yeah, Peter Falk and his Colombo character. You're right, man. He can figure anything out, and with a sense of humor too. So come on.
Yeah. I've
So,
been practicing
but
my-
there's something beautiful about deep sea exploration and deep space exploration. And we're not sure, did we all come from Earth, or are they already aliens here? Something landed here and spawned life in the ocean, spawned life on the ground.
He's got
Matt
my
thinks
theory.
that Adam and Eve. Matt thinks that Adam and Eve were aliens.
Exactly.
They
I think
crashed
it was
here.
like our first or second episode. We explored that concept of, what if Adam and Eve, they didn't have to be evolution because Adam
No,
and Eve
you
came
explored
here
it
from
and I
somewhere else.
belittled it. You explored it and I laughed at you.
Well,
And I made fun of you.
especially if you spell Adam with a T, atom.
Oh.
There it is.
Even with
It's
the
an
T would be misspelled though, because you have to change the second A to an O.
There you go. Well, yeah.
What's Eve become?
Now the truth is that we don't know how time folds on itself. And I was having this conversation with my 11-year-old. It's all about, if you kiss someone for 10 seconds, it goes by quick. If you take a hot match and put it on your finger for 10 seconds, it goes by slow. Time is relevant. It's all depending what you're doing with that time. And so as a musician or a dancer or someone who's involved with using their body and watching, using their body to have people, I guess, inspired by that, you can pull and stretch time. And if you're sitting at a job you hate, that 9 hours takes forever. But if you're sitting at a job you love, it goes by quick. So I think, the space travel and how long it takes to get to Mars, or how long it takes to get the message back, or bring the little vial of dirt back. It's all
14
relevant
minutes.
to
That's why I never kiss girls. That's why I never kiss girls, because I want my life to seem longer. I don't want it to flash by too quick.
It's really funny because I have an 11-year-old daughter as well, and I've had a very, very similar conversation with her about, because of all of this nonsense. I don't know about you, but I've become a homeschool dad. So I'm in charge of science. Yeah. I'm in charge of science, math, and social studies. And we did the great thing about the whole whatever homeschool thing, whether you're into it or not, she and I have gone down way crazy paths together, learning stuff and asking these really weird questions that you would never address in a 5th grade. Like she's like, okay, but the perception of time is different, Dad, like you were saying. And I'm like, you're right. Yeah. And why is that? Let's talk about it. So it's fun stuff.
So your kid's making you smarter.
I told my 11-year-old, it's been tough to hang out with mom and dad for the last year, but what a great bonding situation that I would never have with my 11-year-old, because he'd be at soccer practice or, at some kind of, function with his friends, which he should have. But since he's not, we're really spending these great time, this really deep, like you say, conversations are happening. And it's been wonderful, but it is an awareness now. And I'm 53, he's 11, and I'm trying to act like a 10-year-old and be like, be like him. And I said to him, look, man, as a musician, you have to live in the moment. You can't think about the end of the song while you're starting it. You have to be right in that moment. And that's what life's about. And maybe that's what this space travel will teach us, is not to forget what we have here on Earth, even though I don't know, if you think about the environment and politics aside, but the social issues, it seems like there's a lot of friction, a lot of noise, a lot of static. And if we can get through all that, maybe, is it there on Mars or another world? Do they have the same problems? Maybe. But, hopefully we can see through that. And it's about relationships and treating each other better. And I hope that's what we learn from any kind of new world out there. That if you start I was gonna say, even if it's a blank canvas and it's a planet that no one's been to and we can go live there, we're still gonna have the same problems.
Right.
You know, it's about we gotta learn to live together no matter what the land looks like, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's why I'm the prosecuting attorney on this client, because I'm one of the people that thinks space exploration is ridiculous at this point, because let's take care of this planet first, then we can do that. It seems silly because we'll just fuck up Mars. We'll fuck up every planet. We'll do the same mistakes we did here over and over.
It's so
like
true.
The virus.
And it's a sad state of affairs, this world. But then again, if you look past all the friction and the static noise, there is my relationship with my wife and son. There is my relationship with my drum set. And I hope even people that we don't understand or don't like, they've got these great relationships with something they love. And if we can just kind of use those moments of love and realize we're all somehow here to enjoy life and not tell people how to live it. And it's difficult, you know? I mean, I've learned to accept people, especially in a rock band. We're not going to agree on everything. And the trust we have on stage, if we can bring that trust into the boardroom, into the meetings, we'd be a powerful band. But, you know.
So if you had your choice of planets, you know, that say they're all inhabited, which planet should Jane's Addiction have actually come from?
Ooh, that's a good one, man. Well, you know, I think all 4 members come from a different planet, and that's what made it. That made the town so good, you know.
Yeah, I want to hear. All right, so who is each person from then? And hopefully none of them is from Uranus.
Exactly. Well, you know, I do feel like I am an earthly being, and I'm connected with Mother Nature here, and I come from our homeland. Perry, I think maybe there's something to be said that he kind of just jumps around from planet to planet because he's always interested in new ideas and changing the direction of the civilized world. And if you think about Lollapalooza or Porno For Pyros or Jane's Addiction, they're all quite different from each other.
So he just came from like the Kuiper belt or something. He's like an asteroid belt of some kind.
Yeah.
He's like Flash Gordon.
Navarro came from a land of I don't even think we found that planet yet.
He came from the planet of tattoos.
Dave's an original.
There you go.
He's a true original. He's a true original. He really is. And his sense of humor to me is always at the base of our music. And even though we're somehow a dark and late night gothic band in a sense, there's something funny and good times about us. And when Perry says 3, 4, bam, it's really about growth and birth and love and sex. It's not about kicking things over and breaking stuff. So I think we're all from a place that we want to help heal, some kind of healing planet with fresh air. And it's hard to say, man, because I think now that we've all grown up and Perry's in his 60s and me and Navarro in our 50s, we haven't really grown up at all. You know, my mom said, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be a drummer. She goes, you can't do both.
You can't grow up and be a drummer.
Jane's Addiction did advocate shoplifting, though. You guys did have some bad messages in your music.
That's true. No, we got caught stealing. We're not recommending stealing.
Yeah. It's a
caution.
caution.
Like
they're telling a story, Greg. They're just explaining it in incident.
But that song was that song
Greg,
was so great.
It's a cautionary tale.
That song was so great. It made shoplifting seem fun, though, because you guys put such a good song behind the lyrics that it made it seem fun.
You know, everyone stole something. Dave stole your girlfriend. You know, I stole the show. And and Perry took everything else, you know.
Well, I heard Taylor Hawkins call your drumming as sublime.
Oh, that's great. Because I wonder, how do you get the word sublime? Is it beneath the lime? Where does it?
It sounds pejorative.
Like a man after my own heart. You should be the extra quibble on our show.
It's true. That is a very quibble thing to say.
It's like below lime.
Below lime. So then what would be
Is it a
above
key lime? It's a key lime, maybe.
A nectarine?
Smaller lime.
Key lime.
Nectarine's like a fake peach.
So would it be super lime if it was above lime?
The super lime, man.
Yeah.
That's bad though.
Super Lime Man would be a great superhero.
You know,
Super
And you
lime
can't-
man.
So does that
You know,
mean
and
is that a
is there some kind of association with using lime in dead bodies? Do I have that right?
Sure, go right ahead.
sure?
If you want to
Go
have,
on.
if you want to bury people with limes in their mouths,
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
or if you're like trying
You know-
to get rid of one, like
No, I know that.
I remember hearing Taxman by the Beatles, and the Taxman's counting the money at the beginning. 1, 2, 3. He's not counting the song. He's counting the money.
I never
Kind
knew
of
that. I never got that. That's amazing.
But I really enjoy talking to you guys. I've got a session here. We're gonna get back to it. But thank you, man, for having me. And I would love to do it again.
Yeah,
we
thanks
really
so
appreciate
much.
it. I'm sure we could probably go on for another 2 or 3 hours because you've been
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, you've been
Totally
great.
appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Hey, can you hit
We
like
all
one of
do.
your gongs before you go, though?
Let's do
I
it.
know you've got like a bunch of gongs or something back there.
Something. There's like a million.
He went back- There we go.
Whoa. Oh,
God, that's a lot of drums.
I know.
That's
That's,
a-
too many. Too many.
That's a
drums.
lot of percussion back there, my friend.
He went
I'd
back
be
like 50
confused.
feet.
I know. I was like,
Stick, man, a big stick.
Well, thank you very
It's-
much, Stephen Perkins, for showing up on the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. We greatly appreciate it. We'd love to have you on again. And
Love to do it.
and I guess we'll just kind of end it there. Here we go.
all right,
Bye,
bye.
guys.
Bye.
You've left the offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. It's over. It's over. It's time for you to go home. It's over. It's over. Go away now.